Well, you had rubella? And I said, yeah. And she said, no, this is serious. We got it, And I said, I am serious. And she looked at me and she goes, you're so calm. Why are you so calm? And I said, because God told me my baby was going to be okay. So I got to witness to her. I got to witness to every nurse that was in there. And my doctor was from Iran that was delivering my baby. And he actually told me he was praying for me, which that just was huge for him to tell me that. But we're sitting in there, we're waiting for the nurses and everybody to come in. So during my delivery, my doctor came in, and I promise you, I know there's a lot of people that say that pregnancy and when the deliveries are horrible. God took my pain from this delivery, because the horror stories that I heard, my mother told me, she says, just think that, just think the pains are going to get worse. That'll get you through it. It'll get worse than what it was, but it never got worse. And even when she was coming out, there was contractions, but I didn't feel the pain that normal women do, because trust me, I had a second child and I felt every pain there was with that baby, but this was God's child. I knew this, and I was giving it to him from the day she was born. But when Katie came out of me, she was screaming. So she had vocal cords, so I knew my baby could talk. And babies, when they're younger, and if you put your fingers to their eyes, you know that they really don't follow you too well, because their focus isn't too well. But when I was holding her and I did that, she followed. So our Lord let me know that my baby could see. And the thing that makes your bed go up and down, it dropped on the floor and she shook. So within a day of me having this baby, I had 3 praises from the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit that my baby could hear, she could see, and she could talk. And that's the things that this doctor had told me. But there was 5 specialists waiting outside that door for Katie, because they had an incubator already for her and all this stuff. And when my doctor held my baby, put it on my belly, he walked out the door, and I heard him say to those doctors, well, she won. So that was amazing to start with, and I swore I would testify to the day I died about my pregnancy with my baby. And from there on, there has been a lot of times that I got to do that. And my favorite time to be able to tell that testimony, we were in church. We were in a small Baptist church in a little town called Pulaski, Tennessee. And I didn't know I was going to give my testimony, but when God speaks to you, you get up there and you do it. And in front of the whole church, I got to tell my testimony of my daughter, and she was sitting in the pews. And it was one of those moments that I will never forget as long as I live. So with Katie, and now she's going to be 35 in November. She's a mother of 2 beautiful boys. Jesse's 13 and JoJo is 11. And both of those children, they love the Lord. Katie has brought her children up to love the Lord, and they do. All of my grandchildren do, and they all got baptized. They allowed me to baptize them in my pool, which was a godsend. Mm-hmm. And Katie's got challenges of her own right now with her husband, but God is straightening that out. I know that. And her husband is a Marine. He used to be with the Blue Angels when they lived in Pensacola, and he is actually retiring now. He's been in almost 18 years of retiring, and they are moving from New York to Pulaski, Tennessee again. That's where Jared's from. So that is that part of the testimony. I don't know how much farther you want me to go. I have a lot of things that I would love to tell you. I was telling you about I had a second pregnancy, so that's how I knew how God had taken all of that away from me, because I had a second child. And not only was Katie would be my first child, I was Catholic at the time, so we baptized back then. I don't know if you know anything about the Catholic religion, but they baptized. So when Katie was baptized, we were in a big Catholic church, and usually there's at least 20 to 50 babies being baptized at a time. Katie was the only baby that day, and my oldest son at the time that I said when I married my husband, he had 2 children. The oldest son, Kevin, he went to the Catholic school. He got to be the altar boy. And when the priest was up there and he was going to get ready to baptize my baby, he said, do you know, there's celebrations. Every Sunday there's a celebration of a saint or their saints or whatever. And that day was the day they celebrated the baptism of Jesus Christ. once a year they celebrate that, and that's the day my baby got baptized. And Katie was born on a Sunday, which is supposed to mean God's child. So my baby, and she's an inspiration. She walks the walk, and God knew, and He's got plans for that girl. And you mark my words, that girl, she is making her mark on the world, and it's just starting for her, because her belief is going sky high. She had 2 miscarriages, so she had turned from the Lord for a while, and now her walk is stronger than ever, and she's been faced with many, many challenges, and her faith is just so strong. I am so proud of that girl. And my son, I had a son, Brett, and all growing up, we never knew. He had challenges of his own. He's a very, very bright boy, and all while he was growing up, he was faced with. He would see people. I don't know how far, how much I can really talk, and that if you really want me to tell you all this stuff, because there's a lot of people that don't believe. I didn't believe, and I never knew about it until my son went into the Army. But anyways, he had problems growing up. He would go into my daughter's bedroom all the time to sleep with her, because he would be bothered by these spirits. And we used to just joke with him, thinking that, he just, 16 years old, sleeping with your older sister. And they had such a close bond. Katie and Brett still do. They have such a close bond. And Brett was so troubled with this. By the time my husband and I got a divorce, he was in his senior year, that Brett was doing really bad in school. And he was always, the one that was going to conquer the world. You could tell, because Brett he is for God. He is in an army. To me, I say it's the army of God. But when he was 19 years old, he had already fathered a daughter, and he was literally on the streets. After his one daughter was born, he was living with the girl for a while, and then he got into drugs, and really heavy into drugs and alcohol. And we found out later, as I'll get to that this was the cause of it, was because of all these spirits. So I had made a covenant with God. I was telling you this beforehand, and I didn't know ahead of time, just so you know, I didn't know that you didn't barter with God. But at the time, I was still in my walk as a Christian, and I had come to Florida. I met my husband. I had been married to him for about, I would say, 5 years by then. And my son was literally on the street. So I was a smoker, and I was smoking out on my balcony, and I had the cigarette in my hand, and I looked up at the stars, and I was home alone. And I said, okay, God, if you get my son off the streets, I will never smoke again. And I had the cigarette lit in my hand, and I wasn't putting it up to my mouth, but I was just about to, and I heard a voice telling me, well, you already started smoking, you might as well finish it. But I remember throwing it down and saying, nope, I'm just made a covenant with God that I would never put another cigarette to my mouth if God got my baby off the streets. And 2 weeks later, he got my baby off the streets. And from there, he went in. There's a lot of things that happened, but he wound up going into the Army. And one night, while he was out of boot camp, and he was just waiting for his first school to go into, he was all alone. His family was at home, and my mother was staying at my house. She would come every year for a couple months and stay at my house. And with this, my mother, I told you, she's a very, very devout Christian woman. She didn't walk on water, but in my eyes, I know that was how I would picture my mother. And my son called me one night, and he asked me to look up online. This woman's name was Mary Surratt. I had never heard of her, didn't know who she was. And my son was in a place in D.C. where they used to hold prisoners back in the day. And Mary Surratt, I found out that she was supposedly one of the conspirators that was supposedly framed to kill Abraham Lincoln. Okay, she was one of the ones along the line. So anyways, Brett kept saying, Mom, just go to the computer. Just look up this woman's name. She's not leaving me alone. She's not leaving me alone. So I looked up her name, And sure enough, she really was who Brett was telling me, because he had never heard of her. But in the meantime, the reason I'm telling this story is so that you know where my son was troubled with the spirits and how he proved to me that they really were there. When he was doing this, he was so distraught, and I heard a crash in my guest bedroom, and it was my mother that had fallen down. And I ran in there, and Brett's like, well, Mom, I'll let you go. I said, no. I said, the devil's doing this, Brett. You know, we're getting a breakthrough, and I need to continue to talk to you. So I went in, and my mother is literally laying on the floor. She was trying to get into the bed, and she had fallen down, and she couldn't get up. And there was a pillow I had just put that pillow there before she had gone to bed, this arm thing. And it was almost like the angel had taken her and just gently laid her in this position so that she could do what God had wanted my mother to do. It was like my mother was born to tell my son what she was. She was on the floor witnessing to my son as I'm trying to get her up. And she just kept saying, I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. But I do know what happened. The devil was trying to distract me and using my mother as a distraction. But while my mother was on the floor, I had the phone on next to her, and my mother is telling my son, this is grandmother to grandson, Brett, you got to put your faith in God. You know, if I'm with my dying breath, I will tell you, she said, and she gave her testimony to my son that night while she was lying on the floor, which that started my son's walk with, that's his testimony. But my testimony, part of it was the covenant that I made with God, and I have never put a cigarette to my lips from that day forward. And the gentleman that I'm married to now, he was the love of my life when I was a teenager. He was my high school sweetheart, and 30 years later, we got together. But before that, I had prayed to God. I was single for 3 years, and I had prayed to God for a Christian husband. I said, the next man you put in my life, please let it be a Christian husband. And he gave me Michael. And that's how I know God's got a sense of humor, because he gave me Michael. I said, you asked for a Christian man. Michael is a very, very good man, good-hearted man. And I know that God is going to change his heart someday. And I'm standing on that, and I'm praying for that. And then the man that I'm married to, he allows me to see my children whenever I want. And it was very hard at first, because I am a godly woman, and Michael doesn't understand that part of it, but he has learned to accept me who I am. I don't have to fight to go to church anymore. I don't want to tell him. Actually, before I left tonight, and this is a huge praise, my husband, he says to me, good luck, break a leg tonight. When I told him what I was doing, he thought that I was just going to talk to Suzanne on the radio. That's what he had thought I was doing. And that for him to say that to me was amazing. And Suzanne is the one who got me to do this, and there's even a story behind that. I have lots of people that God has put into my life, and when I do these things at night, they're called prayer swims, and I pray for people. And when I do, God shows me either what he's doing, what he has done, but there's like this big puzzle, and I try to explain it to people. I don't know if you guys get it too, but when you pray and you ask God to show you something, or I prayed for a Christian friend, okay? My friend had moved away, and my spiritual advisor, and she moved to Guam, Alice. I prayed to have a Christian friend when I found her. And because of her, she had talked me into staying with my husband. I was going to leave my husband at the time because he had addictions that I didn't agree with, and that's what led me to go to the Boundaries class. But like I said, I don't want to get off the track here. From Alice, when she moved, I was so depressed, and I listened to the Z all the time, and I would go outside and I would do my prayer swims, and I was listening to this woman on the radio, and I never caught the names. I wasn't really in tune with things like that, like names. I never remember names anyways. But anyways, Alice and my song was Days of Elijah. And I just loved that song. Anytime it would came on, we would sing and worship the Lord. And the one night I was doing my prayer swims, and I heard the song, and I called the radio station. And this woman answered the radio station, and I asked her about this Days of Elijah song, if she could get me that recording, because I have bought like 10 different ones, and none of them sounded the same. So she said, well, get back with me, and I'll see if I can get you a copy. Well, then when I did call back the next night, she couldn't get a copy of it. It was only DJ's copy, but she said that she would look ahead for me to try to find the song. Long story short, we became friends over the phone, and one night I realized that I wasn't just talking to the secretary, I was talking to Suzanne Lynn herself.